Hey there. That was just a little sample of something from this book. Pat Metheny Guitar Etudes, Warm-Up Exercises for Guitar. So this would be an example of an etude book for jazz guitar. In this video, I want to show you some examples of books like that I use to practice technique or to improve technique or maintain my technique, or chops if you will. It's not easy to find good etudes for jazz guitar, and we'll talk about why that might be. But this is a good one, so Pat Metheny Guitar Etudes. Then I want to show you this one, Bach, Sonatas and Partitas, which is actually not etudes, but we can use it as guitar etudes. Joe Pass Guitar Style, which is a method book, but there are some etude kind of written out solos that we'll take a look at. And the Kreutzer Etude, so this one is also really good for single note playing, line playing. There is even a Kreutzer for guitar method that I have a photocopy of that I'll show you some of this stuff as well. So lots of stuff to look at. Let's get started. I want to start with this box, Sonatas and Partitas for the violin. I've heard a lot of jazz guitar players use this material. There are tons of etudes for classical guitar, and the classical guitar has been around for much longer than jazz guitar. And it's very clear which ones you could use if you want to learn classical guitar. But for a jazz guitar player, it's not that clear what we should work on. So we have to look somewhere else. And violin is quite similar. We can play the same clef and the register is not too weird for us. So we can use this, and obviously Bach's music is fantastic. So I'll play you some of this stuff. So this is the one in G minor called Presto, so it's supposed to be fast. For those of you who follow my channel, you might have heard of me play this in a previous video. And so on. And if you want to hear me play the whole piece, you can go to this video. I've heard many jazz guitarists talk about this. For example, Adam Rogers, I've heard him play this exact piece. So why do we do this? Well, for several different reasons. It could be several different reasons. It could be to kind of develop chops if you're at the beginning of your playing career, or it could be to maintain your chops. For someone like me, like I have to pick up the guitar every day and play a little bit just to keep my chops together. Just like an athlete would, you know, go for a run every day. And some people might be discouraged by that and say like, wow, you have to do that for the rest of your life. And I would look at it, it's just a way of life. It's a lifestyle. If you are an athlete, you run every day. And if you are a professional musician, you practice every day. But it's different from if you, let's say, want to improve your technique. If you want to, let's say, develop speed, then you have to put in more hours. So this could be used for all those reasons. It could be something you play every day. You just pick up the instrument in the morning. So it's kind of a combination of warming up and maintaining your chops. Because if you don't play every day, you're gonna lose your chops. This is very true for, let's say, for horn players. That's a no-brainer for them. If trumpet players, if they don't play every day, they literally can't play. You need to play every day to keep your chops together. But let's say you wanna improve your technique. So you might ask, well, why not do just finger exercises? When I went to GIT back in the day, they made us do this. If you want to look into those kinds of finger exercises, this book is good for that. The Ultimate Guitar Technique and Complete Guide. So that is a Musicians Institute book. And then there are tons of these kinds of exercises. Well, those are just finger exercises, you know, etc. Some people really like those kinds of exercises because you can kind of measure your improvement. It's easy to see when you can play faster than you could the previous week or whatever. But a lot of people also hate those kinds of exercises because they're so soul-crushing, they're not musical at all. Personally, I don't mind them. I like finger exercises like that. Then you could just play scales. That's also a very good way to keep your chops together. Just play through all the scales every day. But again, some people don't like that either because it's not music. The Bach piece. That's music. So it's more pleasing to listen to and it's more inspiring to play. I saw an interview with Sting's guitarist Dominic Miller, and I'll link to that interview where he says that his teacher, when he was starting to play, his teacher told him to play scales and he didn't want to do that. He kind of rebelled against that. But then he preferred to practice Bach stuff because, in his words, it's like scales but with personality.
For a few minutes, and then the other thing I like to do is practice Bach. And the reason why I do that is because when I was learning the guitar and with the few different teachers I had, they recommended doing scales and arpeggios, and I kind of rebelled against that. I didn't really like doing it. In fact, I was probably quite lazy or something. So the solution for me was to play Bach, because Bach is full of scales, except that it's scales with personality. And
I thought that was a really good way of putting it. It actually is, all it is, it's kind of scales and arpeggios, but it's with the personality. So let's say you want to improve your technique. What you could do is you could just increase the speed every day until you reach a point where your limit is and try to push that limit. So let's say you find your limit, and if you play it for an hour a day for 2 months, should be able to increase that speed with, let's say, 10 BPM. That's a reasonable goal. That's a lot of work. That takes a lot of effort to practice it every day. I'm talking about every day, 7 days a week, for an hour. Unless you're practicing completely wrong or using terrible technique, you are gonna improve. And you might say, well, 10 BPM, that's not that much. That is actually quite a lot. That's a lot. That's a huge improvement, I think. If you can play it as a certain BPM and then increase that by 10 BPM in 2 months, that's gonna improve your technique by a lot. But it could also be something that you're doing wrong. So instead of thinking like going to the gym and just lifting weights, you might have to learn how to lift the weights properly. A good analogy would be like golf. Would you go to a golf instructor who tells you to just do something a little bit different and you're gonna get better results? So you wanna focus on what this hand is doing. So now this is for the violin, meaning there is no fingerings for guitar written out, which means that you have to write out the fingerings, which is what I recommend that you do. Before you play it, sit down and write out fingerings. And you do that a lot. You develop this kind of your own method or philosophy around what works. For example, I don't like to bar. If I have a C triad like that, I wouldn't play it like that, ideally. I would prefer to play different fingers. But I find with the index finger I can do that no problem. But with the pinky, I wouldn't do that. So when I write out the fingerings, I have to take that in consideration and write out fingerings that work. So yes, barring with the index finger, especially to adjacent strings, no problem. And I might bar with an adjacent string, but more than one string, like gets a little bit ridiculous. Having said that, I also watched a video, I think it's Frank Gambale interviewed by Rick Beato, where he's showing that he can do that with all his fingers, no problem. But that's the thing, we're all different.
You use your pinky, for example, or
Yes.
like you don't have any problems with barring with any of the fingers.
Well, it's something that you develop over time, you know, and sometimes I play a note with this, you know, way down here. It's a bit weird. But sometimes you have to if you're barring across those 4 middle strings. You can't start with the tip, you know, it'll never make it. That's a simple exercise. And you roll, you do this kind of rolling so that each part of the finger, you know, coincides with a certain string.
That's why there isn't really a right or wrong answer here. I think it obviously works for Frank Gambale. But I can't do that. For some reason, my fingers won't allow me to do that. I also watched a video with jazz guitarist Lage Lund where he says that he thinks you should be able to play anything you're playing with this hand only. Like that. And then obviously you can't do the barring. So that's a kind of an opposite method than the Frank Gambale. It's almost like they're polar opposites.
If I just kind of mute the strings, if I can still get that sound out, I know that I have the sort of the strength, I have the power sort of behind each note that I want to have. So if I do the kind of like barring thing, that's not going to happen. And it just feels weak.
I also had a teacher, when I went to MI, I had a teacher, or one of the teachers there was Peter Sprague. He also has this philosophy, he never bars. So he might play that first phrase something like... but I don't mind barring those 2 notes. As opposed to using different fingers. So if you watch Peter Sprague play, it's like his hand is just moving around a lot. It's also because he's playing nylon string a lot, so the kind of guitar, the type of guitar you're playing also makes a difference. So you have to find the way what works for you. Maybe you are like Frank Gambale, you don't mind these barrings, or maybe you want to use the Lage Lund method that you want to play, be able to attack every note. I think that's a little bit exaggerated as well because we don't play like this, right? We can. So a happy medium is to prefer. So you want to think about what this hand is doing and then what this hand is doing as well. And here also so many different ways you can do this. I guess that's why we don't find a lot of jazz guitar etudes, because there's so many different ways you can do this. You could be alternate picking. Or economy picking. Here, for example, in bar 4, you could sweep that. Or alternate. I use a combination of all that, like economy picking and legato. I use a lot of legato. And slides. You don't want to be sliding around too much, but definitely use slides. Or it could be hybrid picking. I do a little bit of hybrid picking, but I don't have a system for it. It's just something that kind of happens by itself. But that first bar you could totally hybrid pick. There's this part. huge interval leaps. And somebody was asking me, I think in a comment, like, how do I do that? I've never had a problem with those string skipping. One exercise you can do to develop that kind of string skipping is to play open triads. I think Jude and Lage has a bunch of etudes like that with just open triads. You can make up your own. Just practicing open triads like that will help you with the string skipping. You might find hybrid picking helpful. So we'll play that second note, the F, with my finger. Legato and hybrid picking could help you with that. There is also a way where you could just play that note, the C, using just the force of that hand, not even picking it. That's kind of, I think Pat Metheny does that sometimes. He will just play notes, attacking them from nowhere. So that's the Bach Sonatas and Partitas for the violin. I'll put links to where you can find these books. Very similar is Kreutzer Studies or Caprices for the violin. There you have some etudes with large interval leaps like that, which would help you with the string skipping. So it's a good idea to focus in on something that you're struggling with, perhaps. There is even this Kreutzer etudes for the guitar pick method. This looks pretty old. Somebody sent this to me. It's from 1961 by HANLON. This is a photocopy from one of his students, and there's a little message here to us. This student of his says that he got this from Alan, and please do not charge money for copies of this, or I swear I will find you and do terrible things to you. It actually says that right here, so that you please don't ask me to send this to you. I don't have it. I just have this photocopy. So. The difference here is that we have fingerings written out. So don't get obsessed with if you can't just find this. There are many books you could find where you have fingerings written out, as opposed to coming up with your own fingerings. So please let me know in the comments if you have good jazz guitar etude books that you're aware of, because I'd love to find some. I've seen some jazz etude books for saxophone. I wasn't super impressed with that. But if there are some books that you use, please let me know. I would love to know, because I always kind of collect this stuff. So I'll play the first etude here in the book with the fingerings that are suggested. And it's suggested to use alternate picking throughout. So some of these fingerings are pretty good. There are some really weird ones, like he'll do those Barring things that I said I don't like to do, they're all over the place. Then the question is, should I work with the fingerings that he's suggesting, or should I come up with my own fingerings? Then it would be better to use the violin notation, because then I can just write my own fingerings. And I do suggest writing it out. Then you can change. For something I find is that I come up with a fingering, and in theory it might be, oh, it's genius, it's a perfect fingering. But then when I try to play the piece faster, I notice that no, I can't do. I tend to do something else. Then you just go ahead and change. Don't be dogmatic about it. Sometimes we don't even know why we tend to do some things the way we do. It just works. So for me, I have a lot of experience in this, so I would actually not use that fingering. But at the same time, it's good to do something differently just to break out of habits. So I enjoy playing these fingerings, even though those are not the fingerings that I would use at all. But it also challenges me to play in a way that I normally wouldn't play. And I think that's a good thing. Another thing you really don't want to do is to jump with a note, the same finger to another note on a different string, especially if it's a non-adjacent string. To do that would be extremely bad fingering, but in some cases we do that. If it's a position shift. We do that, but we don't want to do that too much unless it's necessary. And again, the index fingers seem to be much better at doing that than the other fingers, in my opinion. There are some examples of that here. That's a questionable fingering, but it really works. If you're not sure how to practice, use alternate picking. That's a default. But if you want to play like really, really fast, I don't think alternate picking works. Then you have to use some kind of economy picking or sweep picking or legato or something. But if you have a really good alternate picking, solid kind of foundation in your playing, that's going to help you. And so when in doubt, use alternate picking. So those were the Kreutzer etudes or exercises or lessons. Then we have this book, which is Guitar Etudes, warm-up exercises. So the problem with those I just showed you is that even if the music is really fantastic, especially the Bach's music, it's not a jazz vocabulary type language. In jazz, we sometimes play like symmetrical scales and altered scales, stuff like that, or we even side slip in and out of the tonality, which you wouldn't do in classical music. These etudes sound pretty much like Bach, but with modern or jazz language added to it. So far it's pretty diatonic, or very diatonic. Here all of a sudden, don't know what that was. Diatonic. This could be Bach. He kind of goes in and out of the D major, whatever it is here. When you play diatonically a lot, it can be kind of difficult to break out of it because you can feel you feel kind of trapped inside that tonality. This is good for breaking out of that diatonic harmony. If I go to exercise 10, we have these open triads. Those are the inversions of the open triad, G open triad. So So I'll probably learn this one next. This is the next one I'll take a look at. Again, that would help you with string skipping. If you want even more of a jazz, typical jazz language or bop language even, you can use this book. A lot of jazz guitarists have looked at this book. So there's quite a few of those exercises in here. And I should mention there are no tabs in this. The only thing that has tabs is the Pat Metheny. This comes with tabs, but I didn't look. For me, it's more confusing with the tabs because I want to, again, come up with my own fingerings, and then the tab just gets in the way. But I'm not even sure if these are exact fingerings that Pat Metheny has or if somebody transcribed them. So if I knew that it was Pat Metheny's fingerings in the tabs, it would be interesting to study them, but I'm not sure it is. But this, anyway, this Joe Pass Etude brings me to the next topic, which is how to play these. What kind of feel we want to play them with. So we could use these, as I said earlier, to develop technique or to have this as a daily routine, warm-up routine, to maintain our technique or to increase our technique. Then again, you have to put in more hours. That takes a commitment, at least for a while. But we can also use them to improve our feel. So in this case, swing feel. Because to me, having a good feel, a time feel, is connected with technique. Because if I have good technique, that means I can kind of shift, I can articulate, and I can kind of drag or push the tempo. That requires great technique. If I don't have technique, then I'm struggling with the piece. But if you have really good technique, then you can start really develop other aspects of playing. I really recommend using a drum loop. I happen to have this Drum Genius app that I've talked about a lot. I really like it, and it's just a bunch of loops. It's called Drum Genius. So I could pick a swing beat and just play along with it. So I'll do the Joe Pass one. What if I take a more modern swing feel, like pole motion? I'm probably gonna play it totally differently, we'll see. What if I play the Pat Metheny one over this? So that was Paul Motion. Here's straight eights. John Christensen on Yellow Fields. That sounds more like Pat Metheny to me. So ultimately you want to be able to kind of improvise. Maybe, you know, go in and out of the etude and start to just improvise. Being able to play just constant eighth notes, something I talked about in my lesson on super chops, because music is kind of flowing, right? So you want to be able to just keep playing. The idea of improvisation much is the courage to keep going, I think Bobby McFerrin said. And some of people are protesting now and saying, well, this is not very musical because music is phrasing, their motifs, their ideas. So remember what we're working on. We're working on technique. We're not working on motifs. So you can do that another day. So it's very important to know what it is you're actually practicing. And here we're practicing technique. And you need technique to be able to make music. So when you're doing that, you do that. And then other days you work on motifs or melodic ideas. Then you do that. Another piece from the Bach Partitas, Sonatas, I hear jazz guitar players is this one. So I'm not going to play all of it because I'm kind of butchering it here, but just to give you an idea of how fantastic this music really is. It's just so inspiring just to play it. You could even use like jazz beats when you're doing this, and I know some people don't like that because you're not supposed to do that. It's sacrilege to play Bachs like that. But hey, I'm not gonna perform. I'm not trying to learn a Bach piece the way a classical musician would. I'm not aiming to perform with this stuff. I'm just using Bach's music to improve my technique, and I don't think Bach would mind, even if I play a salsa beat behind Bach. That's okay. Because it's in 3/8, you could feel it like 3/4 or 6/8, just to give you an idea of how different it would feel. Here's the kind of tricky 3/4. It's supposed to be Roy Haynes on Windows. as opposed to a 6/8 feel. Imagine that you can try to break out of it and just try to improvise. Just go for it, you know. Again, it's like the getting into the habit of just keep playing something. That gives you that forward motion we're looking for. If you really want to make things a little bit more interesting, you could play this as, for example, a 5/4, because then you can use what's called speed bursts. Play those last 4 notes of every 2 bars as twice as fast. Then you get a 5/4 beat, right? So here's a 5/4 beat. We could do something like this. I wasn't doing a very good job there, but the idea is to, you know, do short sections faster. So lots of books mentioned in this video: the Kreutzer for guitar, Metheny guitar, Etudes, the Kreutzer for violin, the original, and I mentioned this Ultimate Guitar Technique. Might do a lesson on this book. I'm not sure if it's interesting enough for a lesson. Ultimate Guitar Technique, the complete guide by Bill Lafleur, is that how you say his name? And the Bach Sonatas and Partitas for the violin. So I think many reasons why we don't find many books like this for jazz guitar. Jazz guitar is not the first, or the guitar is not the first instrument people think of in jazz. It's most of those kinds of books are aimed to they're for jazz saxophonists or trumpets or something like that. Or they tend to cover like theory and scales and chord scales and that kind of stuff, like the Aebersold books. They're not etude books. And also it hasn't been around that long, if you compare it to like these Kreutzer etudes. Like this canon has been around for a long time, so that's why we have a lot of stuff to choose from. Again, with classical guitar, they have the Carcassi etudes and Villalobos etudes. There are tons of etudes, but they're not really applicable for us if we play with a pick. So again, if you know of books like that you use, please let me know, or if any other books that you're using. So don't get frustrating. You can find these books, I think, except this one would be harder to find unless you're really good at finding stuff online. But don't be frustrated by that. Oh, I forgot the Joe Pass. Also, this book you should get anyway. But there's tons of stuff you could use. You could use flute, violin, saxophone music, like for single note lines. Something that you can have for the rest of your life as a warm-up routine that is also inspiring and fun to play. So yeah, with all that, I again want to thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.